And I'm delighted to introduce now our next guest, and a very special guest of the summit. Best-selling author, university lecturer, and entrepreneur, Dr. Richard Florida is the director of the Martin Prosperity Institute at the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management, global research professor at New York University, and the founder of Creative Class Group. Perhaps the world's leading urbanist, The Economist called him a household name. Esquire included him on its annual list of the best and brightest, and Fast Company dubbed him an intellectual rock star. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming a very special guest, Dr. Richard Florida.
So very much. I was saying thank you so very much for that very, very kind introduction. It is really my distinct honor to be with you all here today at this incredible Jerusalem Innovative Tourism Summit. I'd like to say a special thanks to the government, to the Prime Minister's office, to the Ministry of Tourism, to the Jerusalem Development Authority, and to my new friend, Mayor Barquette. We spent a long time yesterday afternoon speaking about our common intellectual interests and our common policy interests. There's much we share, and many, many friends that we have in common. And it's my wife, Rana, and I. We have been to Israel before, but it's really our first time here in this truly remarkable, historical, creative city. And we had not enough time, but some time to tour around with our guides from the mayor's office and the development authority, and to see all the historic sites, but also to see what's been accomplished here over the past decade or so. And it really is striking to see how this city, how this community has embraced research and development, science and technology, arts, culture, and music, as we just heard, the greening of the community, the emphasis on tourism and historic tourism, the authenticity. To see all of this coming together, and particularly it is heartwarming. It's more than encouraging. It's humbling to me because it reflects my core message. I've been writing about what makes communities grow and how to develop prosperity. You heard in my bio that I head the Martin Prosperity Institute. I've worked for nearly 3 decades on how to create competitiveness, how to grow entrepreneurial, innovative startup economies, as Israel has done, how to build better trade, how to raise living standards, how to make the economy more competitive and prosperous. And for much of that time, I must admit to all of you in the audience, I was a pretty conventional, traditional economist. I knew what many other economists had written about, from Adam Smith and the great classical economists to the neoclassical economists to the great theorists of growth, that if you wanted to grow an economy, you needed to invest in business. You needed to harness the natural resources, what economists call the great factors of production: land, labor, and capital. You needed to build high-tech clusters. Well, I came to my theory of creativity the hard way, through the proverbial school of hard knocks. I was teaching at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, arguably one of the greatest, like the Technion, like MIT, like Stanford, one of the greatest technology and computer universities in the world. We had many of the world's leading software developers, robotic engineers, leading biotechnology scientists. When I became a professor there in the mid-1980s, Pittsburgh was recovering from its economic trauma. It was creating startup companies. It was creating startup companies and high-tech enterprise. It was spinning off these companies on a per capita basis, or on a per capita research and development dollar basis, at a faster clip than MIT or Stanford. But the companies and the talented people that were founding them were moving away. I learned this because so many of the talented people in our leading departments at Carnegie Mellon were going off to head research and development at Apple or Sun Microsystems or Microsoft. I learned this when one of our leading companies, Lycos, an early company in internet search, founded by professors at Carnegie Mellon, left to relocate itself in Boston. Why? Not because Boston provided more tax incentives, not because the cost of living was lower in Boston, not because the cost of doing business, not because the cost of talent. It was because the people that were needed to build that company preferred to live in Boston. And at that moment, I went on a journey. This was nearly 15 years ago. To understand what really motivates this new economy that we are all living and working in, that you are building here in Jerusalem and in the country of Israel. And what I learned is while companies are important, while enterprise is key, while high-tech clusters matter a great deal, there was an additional factor that my colleagues were missing and leaving out. While they were focused on the locational imperatives and the locational decisions of enterprise and of industry, there was a hidden locational decision going on over their heads and behind their backs, invisible to the economics and development profession. It's the location decisions that each and every one of us make. It is not only the locational choices of companies matter, but the locational choices of people. Where people want to be, the places that stimulate us, the places that we wish to migrate to, drawn by jobs and other factors, as Mayor Barquette and I discussed yesterday, the locational decisions of talent that have become and are becoming and in the future will be the number one most important factor in economic growth and development. And that led me on a long path. It took me a long time to leave behind what I thought I knew, what I had read, what I had taught my students. It took me the better part of a decade to summon the courage to write the book, The Rise of the Creative Class. I looked far and wide. I studied cities all across the United States, Europe, Middle East, Asia. I interviewed many, many people. I compiled lots of statistics. I will share some with you today. And over the course of the past decade, my theory that people are the motor force of economic growth, that talent drives the economy, that creativity is the raw material, not iron ore or coal or oil. Our human creativity is the fuel and driver of our economic growth. Well, it's withstood some body blows. We had the terrible technology crisis of the early 2000s. The United States, where I'm from, we had the attacks of 9/11. We had the economic crisis of 2008. And every time one of these events shook the United States, shook Israel, shook the Middle East, shook the world, I heard that creativity was no longer important. People were no longer the driver. We would all go back to working the old way where the company was dominant. But this new kind of economy, this creative economy, continues to gather force. Over the past decade, we've seen it deepen. Now, many have speculated on what kind of economic change we are going through. And many important theories have been offered. Some say we are shifting from an older industrial age around steel and textiles, automobiles, electronics and chemicals, to a new high-tech age defined by software and biotech, robotics, 3D printing, and software, social media. Others say we are shifting to an economy that was a manufacturing economy to a service-based economy. Others say we're moving to an information age, a new age of technocracy. the greatest theorist of our economic transformation, the late Peter Drucker, in the 1950s, argued that we were moving from an industrial economy to a post-industrial economy dominated by a new kind of work, knowledge work. He saw this in his studies of giant multinationals like General Motors. He said we were shifting from an industrial economy based on physical production to a knowledge economy. Well, I read Drucker, and I dug into his theories and other theories of our new economic age. And one day, while I was in my study, looking at books on the library, I came across a series of psychological studies. One written by the great psychologist Robert Sternberg. And he said something that riveted through my mind. He wrote an opening passage that went something like this: if you find a great CEO or a great entrepreneur, if you happen upon a great musician or a great artist, a great sports figure, a great company builder, a great politician, if you happen upon a great individual across each of these supposedly different domains, you will find that they have one essential thing in common. They are all highly creative people. And then slowly it dawned on me. What we were talking about is not simply a transformation to a knowledge economy where mental labor replaces physical labor. What we were talking about was not simply the shift from manufacturing to services, from industry to technology and information of a digital kind. We were talking about something much, much deeper, which I'm sure resonates with each and every one of you. So you see, whether you like the classical economists or not, whether you prefer Adam Smith or Karl Marx, they all shared one thing in common. They were moral philosophers looking not only for the keys to economic growth, they were searching, as philosophers do, to the keys to humanity, to what made our human civilization different than other species. And many of them argued, and perhaps Marx most eloquently, argued that what made human beings different was our ability to use our physical labor, our hands and our backs and our brawn, right here in this great city, the cradle of civilization. To use our physical labor to build those walls, to build those buildings, to build those communities. It was through physical labor that humankind created its shared essence. Marx said this is what made the working class a class. But we now know that that wasn't quite right. There is something else which really distinguishes human beings, something that really quintessentially and inextricably differentiates us from other species. It's something we not only see in those great individuals that Sternberg pointed out. You see it in every little boy and girl playing in the sandlot or the playground. You see it in all of your children or your grandchildren. You see it in your friends and relatives. You see it in your coworkers. The thing that makes us inextricably human is not our physical labor. It's our shared creativity. And that shared creativity is not only what lives to great art and great music and great literature. That shared creativity now, for the first time in human history, has become the very stuff of economic development. Well, we've created our estimates of how big this new class that I dub the creative class. Those of us in this audience and in our communities and in this country that have the great good fortune to be able to use our minds at work, to put our creativity into action. We're scientists and engineers, innovators, entrepreneurs. We're knowledge workers in business and management. We're those who work in medicine, healthcare, and education. But we're also people in media, entertainment, arts, music, design,